Tonight's District 4 Tuolumne County Board of Supervisors Candidate Forum is brought to you by the Tuolumne County Farm Bureau and Nate's Tree Service.
The Tuolumne County Farm Bureau is hosting a Candidates Night, Tuesday, February 6th at the Elks Lodge in Sonora. It's your chance to see the candidates face-to-face in all 3 supervisors' races, as well as Sonora City Council. Tuolumne County and the City of Sonora are faced with critical decisions in 2024 and beyond, and you'll want to know where each candidate stands on a variety of issues. Doors open at 5:30 and Candidates Night begins at 6. For more information, call 209-522-7278.
Candidates Night, also brought to you by Nate's Tree Service. Tuolumne County and the City of Sonora are faced with critical decisions in 2024 and beyond. To find out where each candidate stands on a variety of issues, join us Tuesday, February 6th at Elks Lodge in Sonora. This is your chance to see the candidates face-to-face in all 3 supervisors' races, as well as Sonora City Council. Doors open at 5:30 and Candidates Night begins at 6. For more information, call 209-522-7278.
Well, welcome to our District 4 Tuolumne County Board of Supervisors Forum. I'm BJ Hansen, your moderator. There are 2 candidates running for the District 4 seat that is centered around the South County and Greater Groveland region. It is a wide area which also includes some of the outskirts of Sonora and parts of East Sonora as well. The seat is currently held by Kathleen Haff, who is not running for re-election, so there will be a new supervisor come next year. It will either be Stephen Griefer or Catherine Sari, who are both joining us in studio. How the forum is going to work is there will be 3 minutes for the candidates to provide opening statements, followed by a question and answer session in which the candidates will have the opportunity to respond in 2 minutes, and then at the end there will be time for some closing statements. So I thank both of the candidates for coming in today, and we'll start first with Stephen Griefer with 3 minutes for opening statements.
Thank you, BJ. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Steve Griefer. I'm a retired CHP officer. I served the community of Groveland and Sonora within the last 10 years as a CHP officer, as well as 10 years in the Bay Area. I currently live in the Groveland area. I am pretty dedicated my entire life to serving the community, whether it was the Boy Scouts for 20 years in the Bay Area or various nonprofit organizations. I've made it a mission to work within the community to make sure that the people in the community are self-sufficient, are happy, that their freedoms aren't being infringed upon. I believe in individual rights and small government. I believe in protecting our children. I believe in making sure that everybody has equal access to the basic freedoms of our nation. I stand for the safety and security of our people within the community. Ultimately, I would represent the people of Groveland and District 4 primarily, and then the county. I have no issues with going to the state capitol to raise concerns that might be facing the people in this community. I want to address some of the budget issues that might be facing our community on the county level. I want to promote tourism. I believe in restoring the faith in our government. And as you've seen the signs on the road, I'm your public servant. I'm not a politician. It's never been my goal to be a politician. My goal is to serve you and your community, and I look forward to doing such in the future. Thank you.
And Catherine Sari, up to 3 minutes for introductions.
Hi, well, I'm Catherine Sari. Steve, that was beautifully done, if I could just second that. Actually, I'm a mom and a homemaker and a wife. Definitely not a politician. Didn't plan on doing this. Don't have a prepared statement. Just feel like speaking from the heart. I have been, for the last 5 years, I'd like to say, drinking from the fire hose with regard to looking at this world and wondering, where are things going? What is this future going to be like for our children? As you know, we all went through a tremendous shift and change in 2020. And what I feel like what I experienced was the infringements on our rights, I believed at the time. And I watched people incredibly divided, fighting with each other, and fearful. And I was also observing government, I want to say misinformation. And I grew concerned with the revolving doors between industry and industry regulators, and the influence of, corporate interests on our government and legislation. And so I got involved. I was very active in standing up for what I believed were our rights to have informed consent with regard to experimental and liability-free medical interventions. I watched many friends and family members lose their jobs because they made a choice that was not accepted by their employers. It was very challenging for years. No matter which side of the coin you stand on, that is really what motivated me to become more active and to find my voice and to advocate truly for people to have informed consent. Also, transparency and accountability are two issues that I think we don't have enough transparency and accountability. And I have many examples to speak to at some point throughout this interview. But I have done many research projects, just simply from being curious, looking around at my environment, asking what, why, and how, and from the recent train derailment and learning more about the funding that they had for safety and improvements that was given back in 2019, and then this derailment, which could have been potentially really catastrophic. There's some questions that I have that I'm looking into recently. And then also just our supervisors, I feel like sometimes they're not fully informed on who's behind the grants that they are being offered. And so we are accepting grants with strings attached. And so I feel like I'll have an opportunity to, I do the deep dives. I follow the money. I read the legislation. I look at the connections. I read the tax forms of NGOs. And I think that my research and my ability to deep dive and really read the contracts will help all of us become better informed as we move forward.
We're now going to get into some questions, and the questions will be asked to both of the candidates. And if you see my hand go up, that means there's 10 seconds left. And if I put my hand down, then I'll have to interrupt and we'll go to the next person. But each of the candidates will have the chance to answer these same questions. And Steve Griefer started with the opening statements, so I'm going to have the first question for Catherine Sari. And as we start each year, the Tuolumne County Supervisors hold a workshop to identify goals and priorities for the new year. As supervisor, what would you identify as your top 3 priorities for the county and why?
Well, that's a great question. I've been asking the community what is most pressing for them, and I'm hearing housing, the roads, fires, forest resiliency. I've had my eyes on quite a few projects. So with the forest resiliency, forest health, as we're moving forward, I did some investigation into a company that had received seed funding. Well, okay, let me just start over here. I want to make sure, again, that there is transparency with regard to some of the projects that are on the table and coming down the pipeline. And I want to make sure that we in Tuolumne are not going to be exploited by corporate interests. Okay, and I get the sense that we've been exploited many times before under the guise of health or safety or resiliency or even the green movement. So for me, again, the priorities would be to review every grant coming down the pipeline, to look at the current partnerships and why certain things are working or not working. With regard to the roads, for example, how is it? How did that go sideways? How are our roads not being fixed? What are the issues there? Review the contracts. Find out why maybe there's only one bid. That's a red flag right there, is from what I've heard. So there are a lot of layers. There are many issues, and for me, it would be reviewing the documents, looking through the fine print, and finding out how did things go sideways, and then how do we get back on track? And then accountability. For example, this railroad derailment. If Sierra Northern Railway had received funding to change out 90,000 railroad ties that were old and worn, why hasn't that been done, or has that been done? So that's something I want to look into as well, because that's taxpayer dollars in a grant that led to. Yeah, sorry, he's giving me the 10-second finger.
Steve Griefer, same question for you. Top 3 priorities as a county supervisor for the county.
Well, I think my top priorities would be growth of our community, but the tourism, to make sure that we have adequate housing and workforce housing for the people that are coming to work in this community. Safety is obviously paramount. Obviously, as a former law enforcement officer, I view safety as ensuring that the people can go about their lives happy and they feel safe in our community. I met with the Deputy Sheriff's Association last night, where I expressed my goals to work with them to make sure that they have the tools and the jobs to do what they need to do. Fire insurance, everybody's paying a higher level of fire insurance, working with the county and the fire insurance commissioner to find out how can we lower that. Ultimately, it all comes down to budget. We want to make sure that the budget is balanced. We're going to probably have a little shortfall next year between $3 and $5 million. So we want to be able to find a way to offset any unnecessary costs that might impact the employment of the county, of the people that work for our county. And then lastly, grant funding. I don't agree with a lot of grant funding. I think getting grant funding with strings attached is always a bad idea, but that's just the way it is in our society. So, for example, the buildings that were purchased by the county, we want to make sure that there's not a long-term impact upon the county, whether it's maintenance and upkeep and insurance and things like that. So overall, those are my goals, to kind of just peel back the curtain, look at all of the individual issues that are affecting the people in our community, and strive to make sure that we all have a good understanding of how we can move forward.
We'll stay with Steve Griefer for this next question. If you have one, what would you say is your biggest gripe right now in county government and how it's operated?
Biggest gripe. I think it's communication. I don't like the way we communicate with the people. As it says specifically on my signs, I'm your public servant. I think the county, and I'm not saying that they don't, I just think we can do better. I'd like to address some of the issues that we don't get the message out to the people effectively. And I think a lot of people don't understand how government works or why they do what we do. And decisions are being made, and there's a lot of guessing game of why it gets done. And I think my biggest gripe is education and making sure that people understand why we do, which goes right into the budget. People need to understand why we spend money where we're spending money, and how are we going to build on the infrastructure within our communities, whether it's the roads or it's water lines or it's electrical, PG&E, and make sure that we as a community come together and have a better understanding of how the government works, and that the government should be working for you and not the reverse.
And Catherine, sorry, same question. Biggest gripe right now with county government?
It was going to be very similar. It's the communication. I've been to a committee meeting, and I've watched even the disconnect between City Council and the Board of Supervisors. I agree with Steve that a lot of people don't understand the what's and the whys for what the county's doing, and it would be really wonderful for all of us to have a better understanding. I think for me personally, one of my top 3 goals was to have more town halls. I think more town halls to get community members together to discuss the issues in a consistent and regular fashion would be incredibly beneficial for all of us, to be able to hash out our differences and to talk about solutions, because everyone has something to offer. And I think the sooner that we can start discussing items on the agenda and bringing the public in and asking for their input, I think that's going to be helpful for the Board of Supervisors. And that's something that I look forward to doing as a supervisor, is engaging the public. I have a channel where I've been documenting and sharing my findings and trying to reach people for quite a while with the issues I care about that impact our health and our well-being and our safety and our, if you want to use the word resilience that everybody uses. I think that it's time for us to start talking about what's happening in our world, because if people are paying attention, there is a growing disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And it's time for us to really think about, where is this going? What do all of these changes mean for us? These partnerships, public, private, who really benefits? And I think town halls and better communication will help us navigate.
And Catherine, sorry, staying with you for the next question. Groveland especially is an area with strong tourism. That's a big part of your would be your district, and several development projects are proposed along the Highway 120 corridor. In recent years, there has been talk among the Board of Supervisors about potentially passing new fees on development projects to better fund other services in the county, like fire and law enforcement. How do you feel about that idea?
Well, I'd have to look over those particulars more carefully. I do know that business owners, my understanding, just from talking to a few people who are business owners in Groveland, is that there are some frustrations with the transient occupancy tax, because they feel like they are bringing in a lot of tourism, which is helpful for local businesses. And they're paying, I think it's a 12% tax to the county. And I think my understanding is that the business owners, the hotels, the Airbnbs, are feeling like when they're ready to have more projects or support in Groveland, that the county is not allocating as much as they feel they should. So I'd like to get more feedback from the local business owners out there to find out how they feel about that. Some of the taxes being spent on law enforcement, as you said, and fires, and it really all depends on how that is going to be divvied up. I know that quite a bit of money has been going toward these forest health resiliency projects, and I'd love an opportunity at some point to discuss where I see the money flowing, because what I'm seeing is that ultimately some of these projects will benefit large corporations like Alphabet, Meta, Stripe, and actually not the people. So there's a lot of layers here, and that should be a more in-depth conversation and town hall.
And Steve Griefer.
So I met on Monday with the Chamber of Commerce in Highway 120, and I spoke just recently to Lisa Mayo, who's the head of the Visit Tuolumne Visitors Bureau. We spoke in length about how can we develop better tourism within the community, and one of the issues that did come up was resources to support that growth. Groveland does generate 45% of the TOT tax for the county, and a lot of people don't realize that even though that's 45% of the TOT tax, that goes into the general fund. Groveland does have something unique. It has an ambulance which is paid for by the Groveland community, so they have access to that. So we are looking at ways to develop better tourism and getting more resources into the community to promote the tourism and the growth in there. One of the things I have an issue with is the new facilities that are being proposed and put in. They're not paying in as much as I think they should be to support the medical and fire in the roads. Airbnb, for example, pays 14 to 16% to the county to have that. Like I said, all that money goes into the general fund, and I think we just need to show that the money is going to the right places. It's important to promote tourism. It's the second largest, if not the first, within the county, job-wise, other than government and the First Nation tribes. So working with all of those different agencies and working with those groups to make sure that they have an equal seat at the table regarding what their expectations are and what the county can do for them is paramount to being a successful supervisor for District 4.
Steve Griefer, staying with you for this next question. Groveland was really impacted last summer during the peak tourism season by lengthy power outages. Tuolumne County obviously does not oversee PG&E's infrastructure, but what do you see as the role of a supervisor, both during a time of emergency like that and also afterwards?
Well, I was very critical of the county on this failure, and it was clearly a failure in my opinion. Nothing against anybody who took time off to go see their families, but you cannot leave the Groveland area out of power for 58 hours without actually doing something. And Director Goldenberg, who was the acting chair, could have taken steps to start process to get either supplies or necessary equipment into the area. As the Board of Supervisor that would represent that area, one of the things that we have the ability to do is saber rattle, and that means get on the phone with PG&E, start calling, declare a slight state of emergency, get the funds going from the county to the location, bring in extra resources, whether it's the Red Cross or the Sheriff's Department or CERT or any of these others, because there was a lot of people that really suffered. And I don't mean just the businesses, because they really took the impact. The county lost $2 to $3 million in TOT tax in those 58 hours. But it was the people who didn't have air conditioning and they didn't have power and they couldn't get the word out on where to go. We have this resiliency center up in Groveland, and it wasn't opened, and then we heard various reasons, and I just don't buy it. Maybe it's the skeptic in me, and I'm not blaming any one person, but I know that the top three decision makers weren't in the county at the time, and that's just a failure in government. There should always be a chain of command. There should always be someone with their ear to the ground, and whether it's your District 4 or District 1 or what have you, we have to work together as a team. And where I'm going with this is I clearly don't think that the current Board of Supervisors are rowing in the same direction. And by that, we have these events fall through the cracks where a lot of people suffered, and there was really no accountability by the Board of Supervisors.
And Catherine, sorry, same question to you.
Well said, actually. I agree with much of what he just said, and it comes down to, again, the lack of communication. It was almost... It was, you almost have to chuckle, but not really, because all of the money, all of the talk about these resilience centers, only to have them not be available during a time of great need. that was unbelievable for me to hear, considering how much money and hype went into these centers. And from what I understand, we have three that we have a third that we're building, and then possibly I think they're discussing a fourth. And I was one of the few that had found that the funding for the resilience centers had come through the Rockefeller Foundation, through HUD, and the National Disaster Resilience Program. So again, you have to wonder, are these processes really being set up for the people? I couldn't believe on the first opportunity that they could have been open during that time of need, that they weren't. Like Steve said, it's having that chain of command. It is having those open lines of communication, and if they're not rowing in the same direction, then that's where we have a breakdown. Obviously, these people needed power. I understood they lost around $2 million. I forget those details, but I do know people suffered. People that had, well, I don't need to get into details, but people suffered. Their needs were not met. Absolutely figuring out who was accountable for that power outage, what happened, and how is it still happening today. I know a lot of people have power outages and no real explanation from PG&E as to why. So there are a lot of things that need to be addressed and looked into.
And next question, Catherine, sorry, you mentioned you were hoping there was going to be more talk about forest resiliency. This one kind of fits into that realm. It's been 10 years now since the rim fire threatened Tuolumne County and much of District 4. What does the county, do you feel, need to do to try to prevent future rim fire type incidents?
Well, we do talk a lot about forest health and resiliency, and I think we really need to have an open conversation with not just stakeholders and investors, but the public and the firefighters, CAL FIRE battalion. So I think people have a different idea about forest health. Right now, I understand that there is a company, Kodama, that was funded by Breakthrough Energy Ventures, $6.6 million. And one of their ways that they're going to help Tuolumne County become more resilient with regard to forest health is by apparently cutting down our trees with semi-autonomous skidders, transporting them to Nevada, and then burying these rounds in earthen vaults to, quote, store the carbon. And my issue is that ultimately those carbon credits that they're going to count are going to be then sold back to the large corporations that I mentioned earlier, Google, Alphabet, which is Google, Meta, Stripe. So when it comes to being sold on the idea that we need forest health and resiliency, of course, we all want that, right? Nobody wants fires. We all want to have healthy forests, thriving ecosystems here. Everyone, I don't think any of us disagree. It just comes down to, what does forest resiliency and health really mean? And what are the avenues of, how are they planning to achieve forest health and resiliency? Is it going to be through Kodama-like companies, which ultimately I feel are extracting and exploiting us under the guise of health and resiliency? They're actually taking these precious resources to benefit the larger corporations. I'll be curious to know, as we're proposing all of these, the hydrogen plants, the pelletized, or, the pellets of wood fuel and biomass to be shipped to Asian countries. This is a tremendous market for a few. And how will the population actually benefit if some of the jobs are going to be managed by AI or semi-autonomous machines?
And Steve Griefer, same question. 10 years after the rim fire, what do you feel the county needs to do to try to prevent future rim fire incidents?
Well, I can tell you, as a city kid, my first summer here was in 2013 with the Highway Patrol, and that's when I discovered how you have to carefully maneuver large animals out of a fire zone. So there was definitely a learning curve there, but it's important to realize that, we're not just clear-cutting our forests. They are, a good, healthy forest is 10 trees to every acre. And people don't realize that what happens is when the snow lands on the canopy of those trees, because they're overgrown, the snow evaporates and that doesn't get into the watershed. So we need to work with our allied partners, whether it's CAL FIRE or it's the government agencies, BLM, the Forestry Department, to make sure that our healthy forests remain that way. Fire is a natural part of the health of the forest, but the reality is that if we don't take care of it, we don't remove the brush that's on the ground, ultimately we're going to have another rim fire. I remember standing on the front lines of the fire back in 2013, and I remember talking to CAL FIRE, and they said the only reason that they saved Groveland, Pine Mountain Lake, that area, is because Pine Mountain Lake took such good ownership and care of the property owners and their lots to make sure that there wasn't a lot of fuel there, because if they had not done that, then CAL FIRE wouldn't have been able to stop it, and it would have wiped out Groveland. So My goal is to work with those agencies. My goal is to work with, the board of directors, the superintendents of all the different organizations, and CAL FIRE, and be a conduit and information, source, so that everybody understands that we're pulling together, rowing in the same direction. And as a supervisor, that's ultimately the goal, because we all know that if we don't log it or we graze it, we're going to watch it burn. And that takes out tourism, and it takes out the logging, and that takes out our jobs, and everything just collapses from there. So it's important that we work together as a board of supervisors and as your District 4 supervisor, making sure that we're all on the same page.
And Steve Griefer, next question is in regards to one of the kind of emerging hot button issues. Airbnbs are becoming more prevalent around Tuolumne County, including District 4. City of Sonora has put in place regulations to limit new Airbnbs. Do you think the county should look at doing anything similar?
Well, it's a tough one because, I don't believe government should step on people's rights. And if you own a piece of property and you want to use it a certain way, you should be allowed to use it that certain way. And I understand that the complexity of that issue is by having more Airbnbs in place, we lose more housing for the workforce. And the more housing that we lose for workforce, the less people that are going to work in this community. So I think it has to be a very open discussion of what's in the best interest of the community. I know that there are some homeowners associations that are losing all of their long-term rentals, and they're becoming all Airbnbs, and that's having a massive impact on the resources, whether it's water or trash, electric, the roadway damages and things like that. So I think what we have to do is reach out to the property owners and find out what their ultimate goal is, and see if there's a way that we could come together with developing a plan. So maybe we have as many long-term rentals as we do Airbnbs, but more importantly, reaching out to the developers. You mentioned earlier about development within Groveland. I've spoken to some of the developers, and their goal is to put in housing for the employees. So that will definitely help take some of the strain off of that. But ultimately, it's a free country. I don't have to agree with how somebody uses their property as long as it's not a violation of law. So if they want to use it for that purpose, they can. I think it's one of those very delicate matters that we have to work together with those individuals and never allow government to overreach and overstep on someone's civil rights.
And Catherine, sorry, same question in regards to potentially regulating Airbnbs.
Yes, there's mixed feelings there. One, and I'm still open to exploring this. I haven't made up my mind either way, but something that I have observed is how many people lost their businesses during the shutdowns, who struggled while the corporations raked it in. And what I have seen is the buy-up of properties and because people have not been able to pay their mortgages. So, and also I'm aware that there is a lot of Bay Area money and wealthy individuals who are buying their properties out here and renting them out as Airbnbs. There's also, I just speaking to a landlord the other day in one of our neighborhoods. He told me that he was being offered $900 per room to rent to the homeless. And so I just think about the transient nature of Airbnbs and for these homes in single-family neighborhoods, if they're purchased by corporations or wealthy individuals who don't live here, then you have these you lose the community feeling of your neighborhoods. And Tuolumne feels really special to me. It's this unique, this mountain town. You do have limitations on building because we are in the mountains and the trees, and so if there is housing built to keep and maintain employees, that's a great, that's a wonderful option. But Airbnbs, I'm still undecided. I generally feel like they're important to have for tourism to support local businesses, but then you have to figure out what's the balance, and that would require ongoing conversation with the community, really assessing how many Airbnbs do we have, what is our housing need to keep people employed here, and that would be an ongoing community town hall I would like to have.
Yeah, we need to take a quick break. Tonight's Tuolumne County District 4 Candidate Forum is brought to you by Tuolumne County Farm Bureau and Nate's Tree Service.
The Tuolumne County Farm Bureau is hosting a Candidates Night, Tuesday, February 6th at the Elks Lodge in Sonora. It's your chance to see the candidates face-to-face in all 3 supervisors' races, as well as Sonora City Council. Tuolumne County and the City of Sonora are faced with critical decisions in 2024 and beyond, and you'll want to know where each candidate stands on a variety of issues. Doors open at 5:30 and Candidates Night begins at 6. For more information, call 209-522-7278.
Candidates Night, also brought to you by Nate's Tree Service. Tuolumne County and the city of Sonora are faced with critical decisions in 2024 and beyond. To find out where each candidate stands on a variety of issues, join us Tuesday, February 6th at Elks Lodge in Sonora. This is your chance to see the candidates face-to-face in all 3 supervisors races, as well as Sonora City Council. Doors open at 5:30 and Candidates Night begins at 6. For more information, call 209-522-7278.
And staying with Catherine Sari, another hot-button issue. There's been talk the Tuolumne County Board of Supervisors could look into the idea of allowing marijuana dispensaries at some point in the future. The city of Sonora allows marijuana dispensaries with regulations. The unincorporated parts of Tuolumne County does not. As supervisor, what would be your thoughts on potentially allowing marijuana dispensaries?
Well, I know a lot of people, many people that I know have a problem with this. For me personally, I have not given this too much thought. I don't personally choose to use marijuana, but I do know people that have used medical marijuana and enjoy it. I think, again, this would be more conversation for the community. What have we seen in other parts of California when dispensaries have been opened? Is there, so I don't have a strong opinion on this one yet. With regard to dispensaries and who will be benefiting, local people here. One thing I did remember is there was a large marijuana bust. I think it was out near Jupiter or somewhere out here. It was a headline in the paper, and people were proud of this bust and how many millions they had captured. And I almost find it just interesting that why now? Why are we suddenly going to make it okay? It's just the back and forth. Like you can do it now, you can't do it, and I have to learn more about this and what's behind it before I have a solid say or opinion on it.
Steve Griefer, your opinion on potentially allowing marijuana dispensaries in the unincorporated areas?
So this is an issue that has put California right in the center of conflict between the state and the federal government. The federal government says marijuana is illegal in the federal parks. California says it's legal. You can get a medical marijuana card. You can use it, go down to the dispensary and buy it. There's always a elephant in the room that says, so if we do this, what is the byproduct of that? Well, the byproduct of that is if people they're not working or they're down on their luck and they can't make ends meet, how do they get the money to get the medicine that they need, right? So sometimes that results in higher crime, burglaries, and especially in rural areas where law enforcement isn't as accessible as it might be in East Sonora. This is a very important issue on the Groveland side because we don't have very much of the in-view patrol right now because of the staffing for the sheriffs. But I know that they're working on that, and I can come back to that. I do agree that we need to have more town halls. There's been times when I was making decisions where I would vote in favor of something that I was personally against them. So if the community as a whole wanted to have this dispensary in the Groveland area, then I would have to really look at it seriously to find out the pros and the cons. Right now, there are more negatives than there are positives. Yes, you're going to say there's tax revenue, but the reality is when Colorado did their marijuana initiative, they expected to get all these billions of dollars, and the reality is they didn't. And not only did they not get it, their DUI marijuana fatalities went through the roof because people weren't being responsible. I'm all for, as I said earlier, people being responsible and enjoying the freedoms of their world. So if you want to use medical marijuana at your house, do such. If you want to have a beer at your house, do such. Just don't get on the road. Don't drink and drive. Don't kill someone I care about or someone I know about. Those are the byproducts of that. And yes, that's the sky is falling. But the reality is if we don't, as a society, especially as a board of supervisors, look at the whole project, it could be a massive failure.
And Steve Griefer, next issue is, I'm curious your thoughts on homelessness. Tuolumne County has approved the purchase of properties in Soulsbyville, Jamestown, and Sonora. How do you feel the county is doing on the issue of homelessness right now, and is it on the right path?
Again, that's another one of those. There's 3 types of arguments. There's logical, emotional, and philosophical. And this is one of those that covers all of those, right? So emotionally, we want to be able to take care of the people who want to be taken care of. And there's 2 types of homeless, in my opinion. And there are those by choice and by circumstance. The ones who choose to be homeless, again, it's a free country. If you want to be that way, great. Just don't impact the water. Don't steal. Don't take the electricity. Don't break the law. And that's where the sheriffs have to get involved. If you're, by circumstance, then society should help. Charity begins at home, and we should really work on helping those who wish to help themselves. My issue with the purchases of those buildings, and Catherine alluded to it earlier, it was the lack of communication, the failure of communicating between the city and the county. And I'm not against the purchases of the buildings. I am unsure of how it's going to impact downrange. And that's what we should do. We as a society don't look downrange. We don't say, hey, how is this going to affect us in 3, 5, 10 years? Who's going to monitor those buildings? The grant funding is great because the grants are going to pay for the buildings and the upkeep to get them open, but who pays for it afterwards? And what happens when those grants are no longer available? Are we going to shut those building downs and put those people back on the road under the bridges? I couldn't, as a society, see us doing that. So, there's only approximately 800, 900 homeless individuals that we've identified within our community. We've transitioned about 10% of them from the road to traditional housing. And this is a great way to go about it. This is an important step to help people helping themselves. But again, we have to look at the health of the budget. We have to look at the long-term implications, the building upkeeps, the insurance, the damages potentially. Are we going to allow pets? There's a whole slew of things that I just don't feel that this current board addressed before accepting the money and then making the purchases of those properties. And as a supervisor, I would not be in favor of voting for those until I had a complete and overall picture of the long-term plan.
Catherine, sorry, same question in regards to homelessness. The county has purchased properties in Soulsbyville, Jamestown, and Sonora. Do you feel the county is on the right path when it comes to addressing homelessness?
I have always had a heart for people that are out in that weather. But what I will say is exactly that, we get the grant funding to throw money at the housing, but then who is going to maintain the facilities, make sure that these individuals have the medical care that they need, that they are learning the skills they need to become independent and self-sufficient. So I've looked into Housing First, and that's something that Tuolumne County has also talked about. The Housing First model, in my opinion, has not worked. If you look at places like Seattle and San Francisco, it made things worse. There were issues when I lived in Fresno where there were contracts made and federal dollars were spent on building these little isolation units where they were 400 plus per square foot. And they had their own faucets and toilets, and people then would, stay in their units, and if they were users, they could continue to use. There was no sense of community. There was no real plan to help these people get back on their feet. There are models out there that work. There's a wonderful organization called Community First, Mobile Loaves and Fishes, and they're out of Austin, Texas, and that's where they actually used private money, acreage, ecopods, and they had community bathrooms, community showers, a medical facility on site, and a skills workshop so people could actually feel empowered to come out of their addictions. They could get the treatment that they needed. That was a system that worked. As for just purchasing houses to house people, we have to look at case by case. Who are we housing? How are they vetted? What's the process? How long will they be using the housing? And some people are not willing to make that effort to pull themselves out, and maybe we don't have the resources to help them pull themselves out. Again, it's case by case. I know that it's upsetting for communities who are concerned about their children, Soulsbyville, in these communities where there are families and they're not sure who's coming in and the vetting process. And there's a lot of layers there as well. Again, town hall.
So I'm going to turn over now to questions from the community. Before this forum, we invited the communities to submit questions that they had for the district races, and we had 2 questions for the District 4 candidates that were submitted. The first question came from Robert, and it may have been in relation to some comments made at some point in time, but his question that he wanted to ask both of you running for the District 4 race, he would just like to know your view on the COVID vaccinations. So, Catherine, sorry, you're first on that one.
Oh, I have many opinions on this. So, the COVID vaccinations were authorized under the emergency use authorization, which it means they are experimental, and they are also liability free. So everyone giving and injecting those vaccines, let's rephrase this: they are not vaccines; they are technically gene therapies. They are a brand new technology that's never been used before. Okay, so that's the mRNA gene therapies. So I have a real issue with those being pushed on society. We were promised they were safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. And I think anyone who's been reading the news understands that with those medical interventions, liability-free experimental interventions, that there were more risks than benefits. I think we can look back and say that now. At least I would say that. And I did not like how they were, people had to choose between putting food on the table or taking something against their will. And that was a very challenging decision for a lot of my peers. And I watched that unfold. And I am very uncomfortable with any government mandating something where there's no consequences for the harms that could be caused. So that's how I feel about the COVID gene therapies.
Steve Griefer, same question was submitted by Robert. Just want to know your view on COVID vaccinations.
Well, so Catherine and I are miles and miles and miles apart on certain items, but I think we both stand by this one. I think whether it is gene therapy, and I'm not saying it's not. I'm not challenging you in the least bit. But whether it's gene therapy or it's been blessed by the government that it's all great and everything, I think it boils down to personal choice. I think each person should have the right to decide what they want to put in their body. And I think this was a political football that got bounced around because that was the flavor of the day, and a lot of innocent people were forced to do things that they didn't want to do. I personally did not take the vaccine, although I was required each week to take a test to make sure I was negative due to my employer, but at least my employer gave me the option. I agree with Catherine that there was a bunch of people, my sister was one, that had to take the vaccine to keep her job, and it's just one of those things. Catherine and I spoke once. She corrected me, and I will publicly say it here and now that I said that she was anti-vax, and that's not true. She's anti-COVID vax. And, part of this job is understanding when you may misspeak and you say, you make a bad statement, you correct it. And so I want to apologize publicly. With that being said, it still boils down to personal choice. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. If you want to go into a building that they say you have to wear a mask, you don't have to go into that building. If you choose to wear it and you want to go in, great. The best part about being an American is having all of our freedoms, and freedom of choice is one of those freedoms. So my position on that is I would never, ever tell anybody that they have to put something into their body that they don't want to have put in their body.
The other question we had submitted from the community from Carrie, she wanted to know your thoughts on evacuation planning and evacuation routes. She would like to see more of that being a priority, more evacuation routes and evacuation planning. Is that something you could address as a supervisor?
Not only can I address it as a supervisor, but as a retired highway patrolman, if you want to see true panic, just start directing traffic for a living. Because when we had the mock fire, everybody knew what the routes were. The problem is that it just takes one individual to think that they're more important than anybody else, and they bring their boat or their horse trailer or what have you, and it jackknifes in the road, and now we've lost that route. So I think there's two parts of this. Is one, we need to educate the public and show them where the routes are and make sure that they understand this is what we need to do. The second part of that is what to bring in an emergency. Your boat is replaceable. You are not. The house is replaceable. You are not. I don't want to see any animals get harmed, so let your animals go if they're large livestock. So because we can always rebuild and move forward, but we can't replace people. So I've directed traffic. I've been at large incidences. Like I said, my first fire here was the rim fire between the mock fire and the other events. And it's not just a fire. It's a massive sheet of water that comes roaring through Tuolumne County, as we had several years ago, and we lost several roads, and one person lost their life as a result of that. So we want to make sure that everybody knows what to do and how to execute the mission. The mission is to get out safely and to come back and fight and rebuild another day. And we have to work together. Again, I've said this before. We as a society, as a community, have to row together in one direction. And I know it's tough. I don't want to leave my home or my animals behind or what have you, but we have to look at the large picture, educate the public, have those town halls, get those meetings out, use the internet, use Facebook, use every tool possible to make sure that everybody knows what the plan is. As we all seen for football, we have to know what the play is so we're all on the same page running downfield. So that would be my goal, is to work with all of those different groups and agencies that I've spoken about and make sure that we're all on the same page for the evacuation routes.
And Catherine, sorry.
I can't top that, Steve. I mean, it's beautiful. So I just say that everything that he just said, and even myself personally, I think ongoing communication about where we would go in the event of an emergency, having that supplies bag. I packed a bug out bin, and I've got that ready to go, and have supplies in my car ready to go. So just ongoing education and reminders that, at any moment you could be caught off guard. And if you're out in your car, do you have in your car, for example, addresses, phone numbers that are important to you? If the cell towers go out? How are you going to communicate? Where are you going to go? Having those resources on hand. Yep, I agree. It is important to have evacuation routes ready to go and a coordinated plan. And again, that would be more town halls, like he was saying, and collaboration and just ongoing discussion. So.
Well, thank you both for answering all of these questions. At the start of the forum, we had Steve Griefer begin the opening statements. So I'll now open up the closing statements, and we'll start first with Catherine Sari.
Well, thanks for hosting, BJ. And I was thinking I would love at some point to have a conversational style just discussion, because there's so many things that come up as I'm hearing these statements. And but that said, at some point, I hope to share more about what I have been doing. I am deeply passionate about our personal liberties, our health, the health of our environment, the health of our children, and that is why I decided to run. I never thought I'd go for a political position, but I care really deeply about protecting and preserving our independence, and I love this county. I love where I live. It's the most beautiful county I've ever lived in. And I really want to make sure that we are all able to communicate, and that all of us actually have a lot in common. No matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, we all have a desire for protecting this county and making sure that we are prospering and supporting each other. Shopping local, supporting local farmers and businesses. So I know that if you look for me on Facebook, I finally set up a Facebook page. I've been off Facebook for years, and so that was a little bit of a hustle. But I am sharing what I've been doing there. I feel truthfully that my skills as a researcher, my ability to look through contracts and read the thousands of pages of legislation to get to the heart of, where is the money flowing and why and who does it really benefit, I think that will serve me as a supervisor, because I'm one of 5. And I do feel like I'm interested in the layers. There are things that I've been working with, communicating about with the supervisors currently, where they have been in the dark about some of the projects that are already happening over our heads here in our county. And I will continue to be the advocate for, reading the fine print and giving people, getting people informed so that they can either consent or reject anything that comes our way. Thank you.
And Steve Griefer, your closing comments.
And again, I appreciate you taking the time to set this up. I wasn't really sure what we were going to get and hadn't been on the radio before, so I appreciate that. And I've told Catherine this before, is that I admire her dedication and her passion to the research. But where I think she and I might differ is that I would be a full-time supervisor. And what that means is that as much as I admire people who are willing to take the time to dig deep and to go in, there's so much more to this job. And it's not just the research. It's not just focusing on a very specific task. There's a lot that we have to balance. And having been in the service industry, whether it was the Highway Patrol or it was all the other service organizations, you have to look at a global perspective, secondly, and focus on the local first. And we can't get to the global stuff until we take care of the local stuff first. And that's one of the issues I have with the state making all the mandates and forcing a lot of those things that are tax related onto the county. And I would want to stand up and say, no, we're not going to accept this grant if it has this negative connotation to it, or find out where the money is coming. One of the things that I don't like is that a lot of the tax money that is generated here goes to the state and then comes back to us, and it's got strings attached. Well, it shouldn't be that way, right? That money is generated and earned here. We could use that money for a lot of better things, in my opinion. So, for example, the roads and things like that. So as your next supervisor, it's my goal to really focus on the different aspects of what it makes, what it takes to make this community run. And, District 4 specifically is a very dynamic district from the aspect of, you have the Groveland side and the East Sonora side, and then you have Don Pedro, and then you have the Chinese camp, all of which have different independent goals and needs. Now, when I get elected, my goal is to set little mini community meetings together and develop committee meetings that can bring those ideas together so we all have a seat at the table, even though you're not actually sitting at the table. That's my job. My job is to take those concerns and move it forward, and then find out what your concerns are and address them. I'll tell you, I don't have all the answers. And any politician or person that tells you they do is lying, because no one has all the answers. So my goal would be find out those people who do have the answers, and, like Catherine, be a great person as a resource. And I've said that to her point blank. I say it right now. It's a great resource to have, on the phone when you have a question about some of these topics. So I want to take the time just to say, I'd like your vote. I think I'm the best candidate. I want to be there to support you, and I appreciate the time that all of the people so far that have supported me, and I appreciate all of the information that I've been given to be successful in this, and I look forward to serving you in the future.
Before we got started with this forum, I promised 30 seconds if any candidate was attacked, and since there was mention about potentially not being a full-time supervisor, did you want 30 seconds to respond to that?
I think, I've been, briefly, yes. I've given thousands of hours into really doing my review, and I'd encourage you all to go to. I have a channel on BitChute. I would like to leave you a link if you could post that. But I have covered everything from and I've stood up against the release of genetically engineered mosquitoes, and I can speak to that another time. But there have been so many projects I've worked on. I've spent so much time, sleepless nights. In fact, even last night was a sleepless one, just thinking about this derailment and the research I'm doing into it.
I apologize. I'm going to have to cut you off at that point, but thank you so much. Yes, and research the candidates, and as you know, this is an early forum, and the candidates are going to be out and about. But thank you both so much for coming in today, talking about the issues, and out there in the community, whoever you support. A reminder that vote-by-mail ballots are hitting the mailboxes this week. The election is going to be on March 5th, and make sure you vote this upcoming election. If you missed any of this forum, you can find it archived on mymotherlode.com. And a reminder, we'll be back at 6 o'clock tomorrow night for the Tuolumne County District 1 Forum. We'll see you then.
The Tuolumne County Farm Bureau is hosting a Candidates Night, Tuesday, February 6th at the Elks Lodge in Sonora. It's your chance to see the candidates face-to-face in all 3 supervisors' races, as well as Sonora City Council. Tuolumne County and the City of Sonora are faced with critical decisions in 2024 and beyond, and you'll want to know where each candidate stands on a variety of issues. Doors open at 5:30, and Candidates Night begins at 6. For more information, call 209-522-7278.
Candidates Night, also brought to you by Nate's Tree Service. Tuolumne County and the City of Sonora are faced with critical decisions in 2024 and beyond. To find out where each candidate stands on a variety of issues, join us Tuesday, February 6th at Elks Lodge in Sonora. This is your chance to see the candidates face-to-face in all 3 supervisors' races, as well as Sonora City Council. Doors open at 5:30, and Candidates Night begins at 6. For more information, call 209-522-7278.